I'm sorry. Again, it's our first call with a new format where we're trying to make the talks a little shorter and also trying to open up our talks to more people from the semantic web community so that we can, as the VIVO community, kind of get an idea of what's going on out there in the semantic web community. So there's not too much housekeeping, but this document that we have here for today's notes, I actually am keeping notes for this call in there, and I'll transfer them over to the wiki. But it's also a sign-up sheet. So we do need some more people for the next calls, and as you can see, there's more slots open. So if you're interested in presenting on a topic, we're talking about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If you want to do longer, that's fine, but we're not requiring that. Ted also made a great slide deck template that had 5 or 6 slides in it, I believe, Ted, right?
Yeah, it's based off of the slide deck that Chris put together for the hackathon. So if you, it's basically just to help you get started to give a talk during the call if you like a template to work with.
So this is the template. It's just a quick who, why, where, and then show us some code. We're all about looking at code here. So now that we're done with the housekeeping, how are you doing, Steve?
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, Steve?
It's going well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Hey, are you ready to give us your chat?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, I'm going to hand control over to you. There we go.
All right. So, all right, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
All right, excellent. So I am giving a quick tour of Vue, which is a piece of software out of Tufts. As far as what I know about Vue, pretty much I discovered it by watching John host some of the other VIVO meetings and seeing him throw together a number of graphs in a very quick way. And I was interested in how he was able to do that. And so I discovered this is the software that he used and which he used to put together a lot of the graphs that you guys have seen on the DuraSpace wiki for VIVO. For our own personal interests, we've used this to document some of our own ontology. And so I figured I'd go ahead and show you guys some of how it works. Simply because when it came time for us to document our ontology, I was trying to think of some of the software I've used in the past to put together entity relationship models and things like that. And that stuff's all somewhat expensive. Vue is free to download. And as far as putting together models of graphs, it's very easy to use. As you can see, when you load up, you just give in an empty map. You have this select tool. When it comes time to put together a node, you just sort of select on it, and you put in a node. You can type in text very quickly, so you can see. Click out, and then if you bring up the formatting palette, you can decide what sort of fill you put in there. It's fairly easy to resize and do whatever you want to with it. If you want to change the shape or again the color, it's all quite easy. And if you want to, say, make a new node, you can just create a new one very quickly. Let's see, and then when it comes time to link them up, it's simply a matter of using this tool to drag lines, as they call it, from one to another, or links. And the links themselves, using the selector tool, can be labeled Teacher 4. This should all look fairly familiar to you guys. And you can drag stuff around. And in addition to that, if you want to clean things up, you can use a number of tools for aligning things, straightening stuff out. And so the this is a sort of very quick and easy way to put together some graphs, which is useful stuff for us in the VIVO space. You might notice some of the other options include arranging and arranging links. This is actually designed for graph data, and there are advanced tools here, as you might see, for analysis and pathways. And apparently, there's ways that they can actually, I think there may even be ways to generate RDF from this stuff, but right now we're just using it for diagramming. And when it comes time, you can save it in a number of different formats, PDF, JPEG. We actually tried saving these as SVGs recently, but we ran into some bugs, and so you should probably just skip to the standard image formats. And that's our way of saying that we've also posted our ontology to GitHub, and you can see under documentation some of the stuff that we've generated from Vue. This is the .vue file, which is XML. One of the nice things about that is that you actually have fairly straightforward code, and we can maintain a revision history, hopefully, as we change the files. Again, it's something SVG would have been nice for, but for whatever reason, it's not working. And so these are some of our graphs. So, there we go. So, you know, again, all this is generated in Vue. So if you need a tool for documenting some of the work that you're doing, we found it to be very helpful. Thanks.
That was fantastic, Steve. I was blown away by the fact that you put it up on Google. Or up on GitHub, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so there's lots of tools.
Pardon? Sorry.
No, I was just saying that was fantastic that you shared it on GitHub. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of tools that do this sort of diagramming thing. Did you evaluate several of them, or did you just land on this one first?
Like I said, you know, I picked it up from John over at Cornell. You know, I've used stuff like Visio and some of the sort of the UML tools, sure. But one of the things that appealed to me for putting this together is that, as you saw, it's fairly, if all you want to do is draw circles and squares and lines in between them, it's free and it's very easy to use. It's very much just a sort of point and click interface. Oh, actually, I didn't show one of the other nice things. So if you want to, you can actually put things, am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. So yeah, so if you want to sort of show a hierarchy, you can do that. You can just sort of drag and drop one thing inside of another. And again, it makes, for our purposes, I find it to be very useful.
That looked very useful.
Yeah, the GitHub link, I guess I can post that into the chat, Alex. But that's sort of, you know, there's the address.
So RAB, what does RAB stand for? Out of curiosity.
Alert from calendar. G.
RAB stands for Researchers at Brown, which is our local alias for VIVO.
I see.
Sorry.
We're good?
Does anybody else have any questions for Steve?
Steve, this is John at Cornell. It would be really fun sometime to have a little session where we try to, I mean, Vue will do things like load ontologies, and I've never quite been able to make sense of what they're trying to do. and you know, there's a presentation capability to it. It'd be fun to just spend a half hour trying to figure out what more it could do.
Yeah, John, I totally agree. Yeah, I thought the same way. It clearly has some powerful features, and as you describe, it seems to be something which could be very specific to our space. And yeah, it's just the sort of thing that we definitely should sit down sometime and just bang around in it and see what it does, because it looks like it could be very useful.
Or alternatively, we could invite them to present, somebody from their team. It's an open source team at Tufts, you know, to present on one of these calls and talk about, you know, what they intend to, you know, why they have support for ontologies, which you'd load one in and I can't find it then, but there's probably some way in which it could be used.
That would be very cool.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
So does anyone know if this is a sort of a monolithic application, or is it something that you could write, say, a plugin for Protege so that as you're editing the ontology in Protege, you get this nice graphical thing.
I would guess it's not quite so modular, but we could ask them. I haven't really poked and prodded.
Do you know anybody over there, John?
No, but
okay. I'm writing a note. I'm gonna go. I'll go dig somebody up.
Okay.
So you said this is an open source tool. Is the source is on GitHub somewhere, or?
Oh, it's just at vue.tufts.edu. vue.tufts.edu.
Ah, I see. Okay. Cool.
We might be able to encourage them to give a talk at the conference since it's in Boston, and they're in Boston.
Oh,
Yeah,
excellent idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm writing my sticky note right now.
You're going to lose the sticky notes.
No, I put everything really important on a sticky note and tape it to my screen, so I have to look at it.
Don't forget to add your passwords.
Those are on the back of the monitor, John.
Oh, okay.
They're secure. I think the cold weather's freezing all their brains up there.
It's the liquor that we take as an antidote.
I figured that's right. You guys are all Swedish. There's probably lots of cognac going up there, right? Just lots of dogs running around with little things around their necks.
Well, I grew up in Vermont where the legend was, they'd take the old folks and around Thanksgiving, they'd get them all liquored up and put them out in the barn frozen all winter and then thaw them out again in the spring.
Oh, man. Well, thank you very much, Steve. That was fantastic.
My pleasure.
So I don't know if Arnold is here. Hey, Arnold. I'm going to give you a presenter, and while I change it here, steal it from Steve and give it to you. Actually, I don't know if you have anything to present. I know you just have some questions, but you have the stage here, and you have Violetta. We call her the Karma Queen of VIVO. So she can answer all your karma questions. You scared him off. He's like, no way I'm talking to anybody. I know what Violetta would answer. She would say that she would use Karma to bulk load data into VIVO.
Of course. You know me so well.
However, I believe there are some other people. Guess we really did scare Arnold off. He's like, no way, I'm not talking. So that was the question. I think that to give a general answer, a lot of people are doing a lot of different things. There are people using the Harvester. John Ferreira, who's now the maintainer of the Harvester at Cornell.
So, Chris.
Sure, go ahead.
Not everyone might have seen Arnold's question. If he can get audio, he was going to ask. I'll just read what he said, that we would like to start loading faculty bio data, grants and publications, and he's read about the tools, Karma, Sparkle, the Harvester, so he's looking for suggestions or recommendations on how to get started.
So I changed myself back to the presenter so you can see Arnold's question there. So what do you think, Ted, about his question?
Well, I think it depends on where the data is coming from, what skills your experience your team has. We did a lot of custom Python scripts because that's what we were comfortable with, and the data we were working with didn't have any sort of ready-made loading scripts. So I think, and now that the Sparkle Update API is available, that offers some more options.
I think that's a great point. I think that what you'll find in the community is that, especially if you want to email the list, is that there are a lot of people using different tools to do the same things because they're focusing on what their local teams are comfortable with, which is probably the best approach. So typically you can find people using Java, people using Python, people using shell scripts, people using Perl, people using tools like Karma, and now that we have we're all excited now because we have the API, and that we're all going to try and do a little bit more automation with using the API as well. I don't know. What do you want to say a couple words about Karma and why you chose Karma, Violetta?
Well, I chose Karma because that's what I'm most comfortable with, and it makes sense to me. I'm a visual person. I want to see what I'm doing. I want to know where things are going. And it's really super easy once you get the hang of it. And you can load basically all your legacy data. You can map it using the Karma tool. You just need to load the proper ontologies and your CSV files or whatever format you have, or if it's XML, you can do XML files, and you just start mapping.
So the Karma, is the mapping process itself like a visual click and drag thing? Okay.
Yes, it's really nice. It's really just, for me, it works best. I'm used to running access report, SQL access reports, and it reminds me of that, basically. Picking keys and from various different tables. So that's what that's basically the environment.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me? This is Arnold Folster from UMBC.
Yes.
Okay, I just rejoined the call. I fell off for a couple minutes. I see that you're on my topic.
Well, you were. Violetta was just recommending. We were basically saying that there's many examples in the environment, and that usually we recommend choosing whatever your team is comfortable with locally. There's ingests that have been written for bulk data in Perl and Python and Java. There's people using tools like the Harvester, but there's also people using tools like Karma. And Violetta was just explaining why she likes Karma. It's very good at mapping, which some of the other things that we do are harder at mapping.
Okay.
And Karma also has great visual tools for creating the loading processes. So it's a good tool, but again, it all depends on what your local team is comfortable with. There's examples usually of quite a few different languages. I think Duke might even be using Ruby to do some of their stuff. So
I think so, yeah.
What do you guys typically do to load data at UMBC?
We're really a PeopleSoft school, so a lot of the skill sets that we have are none of the skill sets that you just mentioned. But we do a lot of loading with just PL SQL. We're an Oracle shop. We have skilled SQL developers. We have for front end, we're using PHP, PeopleSoft, SQR. I guess what's interesting is I have all of the data from our faculty annual reporting system. We use digital measures, and
Fantastic.
we're uploading digital measures with all of our grants data, publications, all the great stuff that the faculty enter into that reporting system. And I have all the data. I have it in CSV files, XML files. I've got it all. I'm ready to throw it into VIVO. But I looked at the tools, and I don't.
Karma.
Okay. I will definitely look at Karma then.
And Violetta has some great videos actually on YouTube doing the mapping to show you how to do the mapping. And I think that if you're familiar with the PL SQL tools and a lot of the graphical tools and Oracle Designer tools, you would really like Karma. I think you'd fall right into it.
And I'm going to make the video for mapping the publications data really soon, so I can have that, because so far I didn't think about creating a video for that. But that's the best part. Mapping publications like journal articles, books, book chapters, and so on. So I'm gonna put that on YouTube. And
hey, Violetta, can you put do you mind putting your some links to there either in the chat or in the Google Docs so that Arnold can see them?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I know you're already famous on YouTube, and it's really not hard to find you, but you want to narrow him down out of the thousands of videos to the few that
and thousands of Violetta Elix that come up, right?
That would be great.
So, Arnold, this is John Corson-Reichert at Cornell. I've also been talking with I believe you're part of the Southeastern Universities Research Association pilot?
Yeah, we're piloting with about 6 or 7 other different schools. We're a little bit ahead, and that's okay.
But I've talked with a colleague of yours at Old Dominion University, who's also in the pilot and who also has digital measures. Mm-hmm. And Cornell has used digital measures for years, so we have. It's not anywhere nearly as nice and graphic as Karma, but we have an extensively debugged process for conversion of digital measures data to VIVO.
Okay.
Using XSLT scripts that are sort of assembled and run through Perl as batch processes. Again, I would still recommend exploring Karma just because it helps you understand the ontologies. But
yes.
I'm going to be scheduling a call with Corey I've already had one conversation with him, and he's going to come back and propose a technical call. And if you'd like to be included in that, why don't you, if you could send me your email address, I can make sure you be included, because there might be some synergies. If you've got several digital measures schools, I know there's some odd things about digital measures. So,
yeah, I would definitely do that. And your email addresses or
JC55@Cornell.
Okay, that would be awesome. Okay.
We actually all have that as a tattoo.
Okay.
John is the godfather of VIVO, so we've all memorized his email address.
All right. That would be fantastic.
I don't even want to know how you got the 5.5, John. That's just that it's.
I was the 55th person with the initials JC. There's a prestige at Cornell and having a really low number like JB1 or something but.
Yeah, this measure of prestige confers highly on me since I am JEB 228.
I feel pretty lucky then. I got CPB at UFL.edu, but I think they've changed the naming scheme like 3 or 4 times. I think I just got lucky.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, Dean Kraft is actually dean at Cornell.edu. So.
Well, hey, thank you everybody for helping Arnold with his question. Jim, are you ready to tell us all about the search indexer changes? I'm kind of excited to hear about these.
Sure, I guess.
You need control?
Give me control.
Right. Well, if you know Jimmy, you know he's not a control freak, so he's very humble. So giving him control is,
scary.
He doesn't take it lightly.
Okay, so let me see. I just threw in the chat window a link to the wiki page for the VIVO 1.8 search indexer, and the wiki page actually contains nothing but an uplink or an upload of this presentation. Plus a link to this gist that is mentioned here in the first screen. Let me go to talk mode.
Can we see the gist?
Can you see the gist? Let's give it a try. If I click on it, yeah, that happened to me earlier.
The snow blocking the intertubes?
I don't know where. No, the snow is blocking Microsoft Office, but then most anything will block Microsoft Office. So I have this gist here, which is just some files that I thought would be interesting and that I'll be mentioning as I go through the presentation.
Okay.
So when John and I talked about doing some work on the search indexer for 1.8, these are the goals that I set out. wanted it to be more efficient, to complete re-indexing more quickly, wanted it to be more visible, that is, so we could see what was going on and when, more configurable, so that you can make your changes and feel confident that they're going to work for your local site, and more maintainable. You know, VIVO is carrying a legacy of many years of development, and this was one of the places where old code had collected. So tried to bring that up to speed, restructure some of it. Just going to hit you with several topics here. And when we were talking about my speaking for this thing, I pointed out that this was neither an app nor a tool, but Ted said, well, why don't you go ahead anyway? And also the question of how long should I speak came up, and I just said, well, I'll just fill as much time as you have. So you're going to have to cut me off if you want me to stop talking.
Keep going, keep going.
By the way, I also recommend that if you want me to start talking about something different, you should interrupt me and ask questions. You know, how did I do that? What does that mean? Why did I go that direction? Please feel free to do so. So just a little bit about the search indexer. One thing is that when someone makes a change in the model, it should automatically update the search index. Another thing that we've taken as a basis is that the update to the search index doesn't have to be immediate. Now, in contrast to that, for example, we found that if someone changes an individual to be a faculty member, then as soon as their page comes up, they should display as a faculty member, and so updates to the inferencing is synchronous. But we found that if you make that change or change someone's job title and it takes 3 or 4 seconds before the search index updates, that is acceptable. We're all about triple store and about triples, and when a particular triple changes, it may affect several search records. So if I change my preferred, excuse me, my preferred title, then it's not just my search record that might have to be changed, but also perhaps that would show up in my department's search record, something along those lines. Also, I can make several changes to one individual, so when I get several triples coming in, it doesn't necessarily mean that I've got several changes to make. It may just be the same record. Besides responding to changes in the model, we also want to have the capability to say, please rebuild the whole thing. And generally, the reason for that has been either someone has been inserting data into the model directly, such as the harvester has done by bypassing VIVO, and so we need to do rebuild the inferences and rebuild the search indexer to match this, this data that has changed without VIVO's knowledge. And the other is that if the configuration of the search indexer itself changes, then obviously we may want to rebuild the entire thing as a result. And finally, it's in release 1.6, I believe, we created the search indexing service where you could say, well, I know that there are certain things that are out of date for one of these reasons or both. I'd rather not rebuild the entire search index, so here's a list of the URIs that I want to re-index. So changes in the ABox, again, I'm going to get a list of statements or triples that have changed. I'm going to, from that, build a list of URIs and say those are individuals that need to be re-indexed. For the rebuild, I'm going to create a list of all URIs in the entire model and say that's the list of records that need to be rebuilt. For the search indexing service, I'm just going to get a list of URIs from the service, from the user, and say, all right, this is my list. The way the search indexer is set up, there is a single task queue. So if you put in a request to the search indexing service at the same time that someone else is making a change to the model, these will be done asynchronously, but not simultaneously. So one of them will get onto the task queue in front of the other one, and that will execute until it's done, and then the next one will go. I say asynchronous to say that, again, the task does get queued, your browser will not wait for that to come back, or if you're using the API, you will get an immediate response saying that's been queued, not that it's been completed. Within each of these tasks, if they can be decomposed into smaller work units, then we have a pool of, I've been using 10 threads that will sit there and churn away at these things to make sure that the processor is being used as fully as possible. How am I doing?
You're doing great. This is actually exciting because, you know, we've been watching the search for years, so this is exciting. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So let me just say what happens when you do ask for a list, you know, provide a list of URIs and say I'd like these to be updated through the search indexing service. We get that list. We determine which of those URIs should be in the search index. So if this is, in fact, there is no individual with that URI, we're not going to create a record for them. If there is an individual that doesn't have a type associated with it, we're not going to create a record for them. We also have a list of excluders that this gets passed through one after another, and any one of those excluder objects may reject that individual. For example, it might be rejected based on type. We're not going to put date-time intervals into the search index, even though technically they are, each one is an individual. We also won't put thumbnails into the thumbnail images into the search index. All sorts of things like this are excluded by one or more of these excluder objects. We have a chain of them. Just pass it down through and see if anybody rejects it. So any of the URIs that are ineligible will actually issue a remove command or delete command to the index to make sure that that's not in there. Because after all, it might have only recently become ineligible if that individual was deleted or if the configuration has been changed. So we remove that. If, on the other hand, it is eligible, then we build a search document for it. And the way we do that is just create a sort of framework document and then pass through a list of document modifier objects. Each one will say, well, let's see, your preferred title is going to go here, and then the next one might say, I see that you are an author of the following items, and so I'm going to put the titles of those items into your search record, and then the next document modifier will do something similar. And of course, finally, we give a command to the search engine and say, well, put this document into the index. This is just an excerpt from the search index controller screen. And let me just take a moment here to bring that up. Can you see my Firefox now? Yeah, okay. Really? And this is something that is done as a real-time update. I've just finished doing a rebuild on this VIVO, and working from the bottom up, you can see that the number of updated items gets larger and the number of remaining items gets smaller until eventually we have nothing remaining. We get a little summary statement. I've changed the way this page works so that we do get real-time updates. Let me just see if I can open another page here. This is a copy of some data from Weill Cornell that they gave me a while ago to use in doing performance testing. So if I go to Christopher Gade's page and the preferred title, and I've decided to make Christopher a full professor, I'm going to go back over to the Rebuild Search Index page, and you see that these 4 items dated 1:37 p.m. just happened. 2 statements were changed, and that resulted in no change to any documents. So I'm a little curious as to why that happened, but we'll get back to that. I guess what I was hoping to show is that I'm getting real-time reporting here and a sort of history that shows up. By the way, if I look at my log, I'm going to see, well, let me get back to that as to more detail on that in a minute. How am I doing? I'm going to take that as good. Unless, of course, I've fallen offline. Oh, yeah, okay, so now ask me about my sequence diagram editor.
Well, actually, Josh was asking what design pattern it was, but yeah, go ahead.
What design pattern it is? Boy,
well, for the filters that you use, where you pass them down through the different objects, and each object gets a chance to take a look, to pass at it or reject it.
Yeah, so the one that either pass it or reject it would be a chain of responsibility, whereas the document modifier, since it goes to all of them, I forgot the name of the pattern.
Okay.
But if I recall correctly, the chain of responsibility is you pass it from one to the next until one of them decides that it can handle it.
Cool.
Let me get out my gang of 4 here. I'll get right back to you.
This is exciting, I guess, because we're still trying to get to the point where we can do an upgrade, but we did add some people recently, and it took forever for them to get reindexed. And we're just excited to see that this is coming out, because I think this will make a huge improvement, because people just have an expectation that they're going to make a change, and there's some reasonable period. Ours took like 48 hours or 72 hours. So.
Yeah, so I just did a rebuild of the Weill Cornell search index, again, using this outdated data, but I think it's fair to say that the school hasn't grown all that much in the last 6 months. But rebuilding this search index took just under 90 minutes.
Sweet.
Yeah, pretty pleased with it. Yeah, it's good. I think you'll like the rest of it too, so let me go on.
Oh, go ahead.
With the rebuild, it's that same process, except that this time I'm going to start with a list of all the URIs I can find and go through there. And you can even tell by looking at the status, this was with an essentially empty VIVO database, so all it has is the geography data in it. At startup, I got the startup message and the unpause immediately afterwards, since it starts up in a paused mode. Then when I did say that I wanted to do a rebuild, we get the start rebuild. We get within that, once it's found all the URIs, it says, okay, I'm going to start rebuilding these 1,405 URIs, of which most are excluded. We get the stop, and the stop rebuild sort of as a parentheses around it, saying there were 374 documents in that search index when we were done. I don't think we need to spend time on the sequence diagram, but finally, the change to the model. Once again, the question is, how do we get those changes into a list of URIs that need to be updated? And there is a challenge here, because I can have 6 statements come in that all require the same record to be updated, and I'd rather not update it 6 times. There isn't any delimiter that says, all right, this is going to be a batch of changes, and that was the end of that batch of changes. And so what the indexer does, it's got a listener on the model, and it sort of, as soon as a change comes in, it starts a timer running and says, well, if I don't see any changes within a certain amount of time, then I'm going to say that was the end of that group. And at this point, I think I'm using tentatively 1 second interval to say, all right, if I don't see any more changes within a second, then I'm going to call this a batch of URIs that are, or statements that are related to each other, try to find out what URIs need to be changed on the basis of that. For full reinferencing, it's not good to rely on that 1 second interval, because actually a garbage collection can take longer than that, and so the search indexer can kick off before the reindexing is, or the reinferencing is complete. Again, that wouldn't be give erroneous results, but it would take longer than necessary. So the reinferencing code has been modified to just make a call to the indexer and say, hold up, call pause, and then do what it needs to do, and then call unpause, and at that point the search indexer will say, well, okay, here's the changes. Now let's find out what URIs need to be updated for those changes. And again, if I look, this is actually implemented the way it appears to be. That is, the statements updater actually calls the URI as updater, and so that's why you get these status messages bracketing the URI status. Besides, I thought it was helpful. Let me tell you a little bit about how I've done the modularity. And this is, as you can see at the bottom here, I wonder if I were to click on this. See, now it'll do it. All right. I don't know why sometimes I click on these links and they work and other times they don't. But this is a reference to that gist. But what I have here is that VIVO, over the last 2 releases, has started to become structured around a skeleton called the application. And the application has these different components attached to it. So besides the obvious ones of the servlet context and the home directory, search engine and search indexer have been separated out as 2 different chunks of code. The file storage system and the image processor that does the thumbnailing have been broken out as replaceable chunks of code. Both the triple store for the content data and for the configuration data have each been broken out as separate pieces of code. And just recently, the TBox reasoner that does inferences on the ontology, not on the instances themselves, has been broken out in a separate piece of code. So I'm trying to make that happen, because each time one of these is broken out, it's put behind a simple interface. And then if someone would like to write an alternative implementation of that interface, we certainly welcome them doing so. So what I'm talking about at this point is the search indexer interface. So let's have a quick look at that. By the way, if you actually look at the gist, you will see that there are comments in these interfaces. They aren't written just as you see them here, but descriptions of what should happen. And there are basically 3 really interesting methods here, and they're the ones I've been talking about. I've got statements that have changed. I've got want the updates that are required for those. I've got URIs that have changed or that I've been submitted by the search indexing service, or someone has asked for a full rebuild of the index. And the others are your standard housekeeping. I mentioned the pause and unpause, add and remove listener, pretty obvious, startup and shutdown. And get status. So in case you're interested in how I did this, or even if you're not, I'll try to go through rather smoothly. But we've got a chunk of code, and this will show up again in just a few slides, so I sort of wanted to mention it now, something called a configuration bean loader, to which you can say, well, either give me an instance or instantiate this URI, and I know it will be an instance of the following class, and that's how I can load that application configuration and say, this, get us started. And then the other thing that shows up is this load all of a particular class. So I can mention in the display model, I can create a bunch of RDF that says, this is my list of document modifiers. Well, set of document modifiers, actually, because a list implies ordering. So these are my document modifiers, and load them in. And this has a recursive or cascading effect that the classes that are being loaded may themselves require additional things to be loaded, whether they're additional objects or just parameters. And we'll have a little look at how that works. So in the application implementation, I have some code here. I need to have the get search indexer in order to satisfy the interface, the application interface. In order to set it, I mention this property, and I say, all right, somewhere you will find the following property, and the object of that property will be instantiated as a search indexer. There's also a validate method to say, by the way, if you didn't find anything with that property, we've got a problem. So here's the setup file, and this goes into the home directory in a config subdirectory. There's a file called application setup.n3, and this is the structure of the application. We just say this is a URI. This represents an instance of both this concrete class and this interface, and it has these properties. And by looking at those methods, if I just go back, we've got this has search indexer property, which is mentioned right here. So this method will be called after that search indexer is instantiated. We'll set that on there. So the has search indexer says it's pointing to this URI, which says, yes, I do satisfy the interface of search indexer, and this is the concrete class. And it also has a parameter that is attached to it, as Ted found out to his misfortune when I forgot to put this in there. So before I move on, questions, comments?
Blown away.
I know I have to keep this moving, so if I do tend to just steamroll along, why let me know.
Do you want to? I know this is pretty. I do want to hear the rest of this, but I was just curious. I know that you're going to put together a task force to work on this, right? Or is that different?
Yeah, well, what I'd like to do is put together a task force to actually come up with a good configuration for this. So I'm going to take that as a segue into my next few slides. Let me show you what the configuration looks like.
I just wanted to say you've probably got a lot of people here, Jim, that you might want to be interested in participating in your task force. So don't forget to give that a plug. But go ahead, please.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is my last slide. So no, I won't forget. Yeah, let me go ahead with that. By the way, before we drop that, the first thing I have to do is come up with a description of the task force, and I just want to make that happen. Lane Johnson said he would work with me on that within the next day or two, so we'll get this off the ground very quickly.
Do you consider task force super awesome?
Yep, I'm right here.
There you are.
Yes, it will be a super awesome task force.
Well, perhaps not by that name.
No, by that name.
Excellent.
I think we pretty much got that nailed down yesterday. Too bad you missed it, Chris.
Okay, so when we have the SATF and we're looking for members, we'll let you know. All right, so in order to, let's get back to the search indexer for a moment. In order to make it work, I've got to have that list of URI finders. That is, if I've got a triple, what records have to be updated, what individuals and what their URIs are. I also have a list of excluders that say what classes are not going into the index. And that list of document modifiers, and again, I keep saying list, what I mean to say is set, because these are not ordered. So I'm going to point you once again at the gist. By the way, every one of these long links here is a link to within that first gist. So if you are there and you scroll down to the file entitled Search Indexer Configuration vitro.n3, you'll be at this link. So these two files right at the moment, one is for Vitro and one is for extensions for VIVO. They're read at startup, which means that they are in the RDF display every time directory. And here's a couple examples. I'm sorry, I've gone to a slightly smaller font so I wouldn't have to edit it too much. I hope it's still visible. Up the top, we have an excluder, and again, it's the same syntax as used before, where I have a URI. I don't know if you can see, there is not a space there, it's an underscore, so this is a single URI. And this claims to have the following types, that is, it is a search index excluder, that's the interface. And here's a concrete type that should be instantiated. And when it's instantiated, it'll be wanting something that satisfies the excludes property, and here are the strings that should be fed to it at that time. So we've got an excluder there. We've got a URI finder. We have a document modifier. Let me just take a second to have a look at this file if my link doesn't betray me. So for all the VIVO extensions to Vitro, here's the document modifiers, which is where I've been doing some work. And there are several, but it is laid out that this preferred title document modifier actually will be, this is just a display label. These are the fields in the search record that will be populated by this query, and here's the query. Now, the ones that are obvious here are based around Sparkle queries, but there are some that are completely opaque, like this calculate parameters. I mean, this is instantiating some Java code, and what it does is not expose as much as I'd like. What I've been trying to do is to push this into the configuration file, into these Sparkle queries, as much as is reasonable without straining the system. So this one adds the email address to a person's record. This one looks for across context nodes and grabs labels on the other sides of them. If the context node happens to be a position, an authorship, a collaboration, an affiliation. Again, as happens so frequently when you start exposing information like this, you start to see that it's not as good as you would like. So I find that some of these are just transliterations of what was in 1.7. They've been moved into this syntax. And because they're more visible, I can now look at them and say, wait a minute, didn't we already get that information in the previous document modifier? And in some cases, I found that these Sparkle queries are not conformant with the ISF ontology, and so we are not getting the information that we thought we were getting. So,
hey Jim, so I just want to make sure I get this right. All those document modifiers, all of that Java code is gone and it's now replaced by this N3 file?
Yeah, there's one. I shouldn't say that it's all gone, because as I mentioned, there's this this calculate parameters, which is a document modifier, and that's all still tucked into the Java code. All we have here in the config file is to say, yes, this is one of the document modifiers. But for the largest portion of it, yes, these are all instances of this simple Sparkle query document modifier. And that's where all those document modifiers have gone to, is into this config file. Is that a good thing?
I owe you a beer.
Excellent. I was hoping it would be a good thing. That is, if it's a good beer. All right. I'm sorry. I'm running out of time, but then again, you know, once I start talking, I keep talking. So let me just mention a couple more things. I wanted to go for performance, and the easiest measure I have is to say that the rebuilding the index on that Weill Cornell data has improved about 25 to 30% as far as the speed. But there's another thing that's happening, and that is the memory footprint has gone way down. I'm not keeping as much in memory while the process is going on. And I believe that's having more of an impact, as Steven said, you know, you expect the reindexing to take many hours. Certainly not seeing that happen, and I'm hoping that Chris will get the same performance change. Another part of this is that question of making sure that we don't do partial reindexing while a reinferencing is going on, so we don't repeat the reindexing of any individual record, and also we keep our memory footprint low so as not to interfere with that reindexing process. So, hoping to see big things. One way to go about seeing big things is, of course, a flag in the developer panel that says, let me see the timings for that last indexing operation. Let me go back to that log here. So this is, you recall I changed one statement. And so this probably wasn't the better one. Let me scroll upwards a little bit. And For that rebuild, there were no URI finders involved. There were, however, 7 excluders, and each one took a total, here's the total time they took. Also the count. Now you'll notice the count is decreasing as we go down the list. That's because any time a URI is excluded, it doesn't get examined by the remaining excluders in the list. But we can see the average time taken, and these are all pretty trim as far as the number of milliseconds per hit. When we look at the document modifiers, some of these are actually much more expensive than they appear, such as the grants and people for project. The nice thing about that is it's only called if the URI represents a project individual. So even though it may be expensive, its average cost is way down because there just aren't that many projects in the database. The big one is this add object property text, which I can't do without, and so I keep looking at ways to improve it. And at least I've got a tool to do it. Trying to set up an acceptance test to use for our pre-release Selenium testing, Selenium-based testing. And what I found, as I mentioned earlier, is that we actually aren't getting the search index that we thought we were getting. So that test is going to come in handy real soon. Got some questions that have to be decided. What's the best way to configure these? I came up with this sort of general purpose document modifier class. Was there a better way to do that? I didn't put any effort into generalizing the URI finders. What would be a good way to do that? There's some other questions about how do we handle boost and private data. And that all boils down to this question of what should be the default configuration. And Don and I are looking to put together the SATF, what was super awesome, supremely awesome task force. And to see if we can come up with
searchable awesome.
Yeah. See if we can come up with something we can agree on as a good default configuration to distribute with VIVO. Now, one thing that I'm hoping has happened here is that I've made it so that Don can say, well, Colorado has special needs, but they're easy to put into this configuration. So we have the default configuration, and then everybody have their own local extensions. How am I doing?
Right on time.
Well, again, Jim is putting together a task force to dive deeper into this issue and come up with better tools for the search index, which I think will help every VIVO. So he is JEB, what is it, 224?
228.
228. JEB 228 at Cornell.
R2D2.
Yes, and as soon as we get a little a charter document that is a one-page statement of purpose for this task force, I'll be sending it out to the implementation and development lists and asking who wants to become involved.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you all the presenters today, and thank you, Arnold, for submitting your question to the Apps and Tools call. It was fantastic. And thank you, everybody, for coming, and everybody in the Northeast, try and stay warm, and we're hoping that everything comes out okay up there.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Thank you. In 2 weeks for the ontology call.